Some people have seriously weird reactions when someone talks about an ethical issue they don't like, such as veganism. It seems they feel the need to employ a very childish defense mechanism when confronted with things they cannot deal with rationally or in a mature way. So, they resort to the most childish reactions. I just wanted to say that at the very beginning, so that if you are one of those people who thought to make one of those stupid comments on this video, perhaps you should reconsider, at least until you've watched it to the end. So, let's get started. Hi, my name is Jouni Vilkka, and this is my channel, TFF Teacher from Finland. This video is part of my series Introduction to Ethics, where I have begun discussing applied ethics. See the playlist or the link below for more information. The following two videos are about two related subjects that both belong in applied ethics. The first is about the use and treatment of other animals, especially, but not exclusively, as a source of resources such as food. The issue in that case is animal rights or animal ethics more generally. The second subject is even broader and actually sort of encompasses the first. It is about our relationship with our environment, so it is called environmental ethics. It has to do with issues such as our possible duties toward nature as well as future generations. I will follow common practice and deal with these two subjects separately, starting with animal ethics. This video is unusually long for me and will have the following structure. First, the abuse of other animals, including animal testing and animal agriculture, then the question of animal rights, and finally, something about veganism. If you wish to support my channel, please subscribe and click the thumbs up button. Before we can discuss the implications or applications of the various ethical theories to the issue of how humans treat and use other animals, we have to consider what is at stake and what we know about the subject. Clearly, what is mostly at stake is the welfare and lives of other animals, but not just them. Animal agriculture impacts the environment very seriously, and so can also be considered from that perspective. In fact, a big reason why veganism, plant-based diet, and vegetarianism, usually meaning plant-based diet complemented with dairy and eggs, are so popular now is actually the heightened awareness of the impact of animal agriculture on climate. But more about that later in the context of environmental ethics. Humans are also adversely affected by animal agriculture in several ways. For example, people working in the industry may suffer from work-related health problems. Also, indigenous cultures, as well as other local cultures and ways of life in some places, are badly affected, especially by factory farming. More about those later in the next video as well. The ones mostly affected and most adversely affected as well by our treatment and use of other animals are of course those animals themselves. The main issue of animal ethics is thus the question: is this acceptable, and if not, what are we to do about the current situation? There are many things that humans do to harm other animals, for example by breeding pets in ways that cause some breeds to have serious innate health problems. Some people may physically abuse their pets. Once in a while, some farmer is found to have neglected his livestock so badly that they have starved to death or are in such poor state that they are euthanized by the authorities. Some animals have been used in legal or illegal pit fighting for gambling purposes, Bulls have been used in bullfighting spectacles, and so on. All of these examples are now considered, at least by most of the so-called Western people, as clearly mistreatment of the animals in question. Because of this almost unanimous condemnation, I don't need to discuss those cases here. Instead, I will discuss things that many still don't see as problems. What people in general still accept, although a growing minority does not, is most of all the use of other animals as a source of meat, leather, or other materials. It is this vegans especially oppose, or at least do not want to participate in. But we also use other animals as test subjects for cosmetics, military, medicine, and other sciences. Animal rights activists typically oppose most or all of these other uses as well. Some animals are also used as a kind of labor force in some cases, as they have been used for millennia. There is some opposition to this kind of use as well, although clearly not as much as against the other uses so far mentioned. But one can go even further and oppose even the use of animals as pets, companions. The reason why there is the least amount of resistance to the keeping of pets is obviously that pets are usually loved and well taken care of. Many dog owners find the thought of eating a dog horrible, and many of them are actually even vegans themselves. In some unfortunate cases, pet owners who are vegans feed their pets, even cats, a vegan diet. That in itself is a form of abuse, as cats physiologically require meat in their diets. They are not omnivores like humans. If you are a pet owner, make sure you know how to take care of and properly train your pets. Otherwise, you are quite clearly behaving unethically. To get back to the point, people often distinguish between pets and other kinds of animals that they feel can unproblematically be used as material. Even a vegan has to feed their cats meat, so they effectively choose that the life of their cat is more important than the lives of the animals the cat eats. As an aside, cats and dogs, even themselves, can be very harmful to other animals if allowed to roam free. The potential problem, even with just owning those beloved pets, is that they do not choose their lives, and despite being loved and cared for, are being used as objects. There are also issues with their treatment by unqualified amateurs who do not know any better. At the very least, dogs are often forced to just wait at home with little to do while their owners are at work. This alone can be seen as a form of abuse. Pets do not necessarily have opportunities to express their natural tendencies, and being unable to do that may cause them to suffer in some ways. But again, these are issues that most pet owners will agree with and try to mitigate once made aware of them, because they sincerely love their pets. So these are not issues I need to belabor. What I want to focus on is the suffering inflicted upon other animals by humans on a mind-boggling scale, as test subjects and food sources, especially in factory farming or intensive animal farming. The classic work on this subject is Peter Singer's Animal Liberation from 1975. He updated the book for a new edition in 1990. It was translated and localized to Finnish by Helena Tengvall the following year, and the Finnish edition was updated by Elisa Aaltola in 2007. I have used that edition as my main source for the following overview of what is actually going on. You may think you know enough about these things, but I doubt you do unless you have actually looked into this topic seriously. So I recommend you read Singer's book. It is a classic for a reason, as it is highly readable and popular as opposed to academic in style. Undoubtedly, there are more recent books available as well, of course, and I would appreciate recommendations in the comments below. There are also some good documentaries on this subject. For example, Earthlings, Food Inc., Speciesism, the movie, Cowspiracy, and Dominion. Especially if you don't want to read books on the subject, you should at least watch these films. And of course, movie recommendations in the comments would be very welcome. There will probably be the least amount of controversy over unnecessary experiments on animals. Militaries do a lot of tests that pretty obviously fall into this category. For example, trying to design a poison gas that has the most horrible effects in order to be able to affect the enemy's morale seems pretty evil to me. Even the intended result is evil, so the horrible tests on animals to achieve that end only have an evil goal. I don't think I need to dwell on this point. Tests done on living animals are of course worse than those done on previously killed animals. Besides, by the militaries of the world, living animals are also used by the cosmetic industry. Since the only benefits of cosmetics are, well, cosmetic, it is highly questionable to cause suffering just to make money by selling the products or to buy products that have been developed using animal testing. Products for the same purpose that have not been tested on animals may exist, and even if not, is the product in any way necessary? Couldn't you just do without it? Some may find this surprising, but experimenting on animals is something that has been done a lot in psychology. Some of the testing can be fairly benign, such as teaching pigeons or mice to perform tasks. But they often also include invasive surgeries and some pretty horrendous experiments that can be considered torture, both of the physical and psychological kind. Among the most notorious of the latter are Harry Harlow's experiments to test attachment theories. The idea was that infants have an innate need to touch and cling to something for emotional comfort. He devised experiments where he separated rhesus monkeys from their mothers immediately after birth and placed them in cages with two mother figures, one of which was a hard metal wire frame with a milk bottle and the other made of soft material. This already showed that the baby monkeys preferred to be with the soft surrogate mother and would only go to the hard mother to feed when hungry. In the next stage of the experiments, scary objects were placed in the cage to show that the babies look for safety from the soft mother. More experiments were made with different modifications. The soft surrogate mother was altered so that it could suddenly become a monster to the baby by blowing compressed air at the baby with so much power that it would definitely hurt. In some experiments, the mother would suddenly shake violently. In others, a metal appendage suddenly came out of the mother to push the baby away. Spikes were also used. In all cases, the baby was of course scared, but always returned to the mother figure as soon as it could. Perhaps you should pause and really imagine the little monkey's situation in this experiment. Harlow and others also forced many monkeys raised in isolation to become pregnant and give birth to see how they would treat their offspring. Unsurprisingly, the behavior was brutal, the mothers crushing the skulls of their babies with their teeth or by smashing them to the floor. Hundreds of experiments like these have been performed on thousands of monkeys. Even before these experiments, there already was a lot of data on orphaned monkeys in the wild. Also, there are big differences even between different species of monkeys, so generalizing from these test results to humans, as was the point of the experiments, is at best questionable. There was also data on human orphans and the significance of mothers or carers to children before these experiments were conducted. For example, John Bowlby was already famous for his studies on children at this point. There have been many scandalous revelations regarding scientific experiments on other animals. Huntington Life Sciences was infiltrated by the British Union Against Vivisection in 1987. They revealed extremely bad treatment of dogs used in experiments. Similar revelations were made also at least in 1997, 2000 and 2004. In 2003, primates were kept in cages without any stimuli in the German labs of the company Cobans. The poor treatment of dogs in the facilities of Harlan Hillcrest were revealed in 1999. But it is not just companies that have been revealed to be mistreating animals used in experiments and toxicity tests. Similar revelations were made at Cambridge University in 2002. In 2003, it was revealed that the researchers at Columbia University had removed the eyes of baboons and then caused them to suffer brain damage. These baboons were unable to move or eat, received no treatment, and died within 10 days. Some of them had even torn off their own flesh in agony before dying. What's especially condemning is that the veterinarian in charge had systematically ignored these mistreatments. I have not looked for more recent examples of mistreatment of animals in the name of science. These examples are from the 2007 edition of Animal Liberation, which also contains more examples. If you know of important cases that have come to light since 2007, please let me know in the comments below. The point is that it is apparently acceptable to some people to cause other animals any amount of horrible suffering of any kind, as long as this is given a scientific justification. Just the fact that the experiment has not been done before to a specific species is apparently good enough to justify it. Any potential connection to humans that these experiments might have is secondary at best. It is more about getting funding and publications. Scientists live under that pressure known as publish or perish, after all. According to Singer, when experimenting on animals becomes a practice in a field, it becomes a self-perpetuating process. The researchers become famous by publishing their studies, so they get funding and advance their careers. Foundations that have funded such experiments are likely to throw more money that way again. Harlow was the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Comparative and Physiological Psychology. When he retired from that position, he said that he had gone through 2,500 experiment reports, out of which most were not worthy of doing in the first place, and their results were not worthy of being published. The whole point of experimenting on other animals is the similarity they share with us humans. If we were not similar, the results could not possibly be generalized to apply to us. But at the same time, it is thought that the suffering of these animals doesn't matter, as they are just animals, as if they were somehow metaphysically different from us. Yet at the same time, science is constantly showing more and more similarities between us and all other animals. All of life is connected, sharing the same genetic origin, as shown by the fact that we all have DNA. Plato and Aristotle were wrong. There are no essences. This should be common knowledge by now. There is no definitive, metaphysical line separating us humans from other animals. If there is some justification for the treatment of other animals in ways that are not acceptable when applied to humans, it is not the appeal to essentialism. Toxicologists have also known for a long time that the results of experiments on an animal species cannot be generalized to other species without risk. For example, the company Eli Lilly sold a drug called Opren for treating arthritis. It had been found safe in animal tests, but caused at least 61 deaths and serious side effects to 3,500 patients, according to official records, before being withdrawn from commercial markets. That was a case of false negative, the substance being tested seeming safe but turning out to be dangerous to humans. It is far from the only case where a drug was withdrawn for that reason. The Wikipedia page for withdrawn drugs is incomplete but already quite long. Drugs are typically only withdrawn after enough people have been shown to have died from their use, and it is not easy to show that the drug was the cause of death. False positives are also a problem. That means a drug has been found dangerous in the test because of the adverse effect it had on the animals it was tested on. The problem is that the drug might not have those effects on humans, and could really be a useful drug, even a life-saving medicine for us. But we may never know because of the results of the animal trials that lead to its development being cancelled. In general, the success rate of drugs going through animal tests is extremely bad. According to the estimates of the industry itself, only 1 out of 10,000 tested substances makes it to the markets. 1% of the tested substances makes it to clinical tests, and only 5% of those are accepted. One problem with the experiments is that, at least in the past, there has been a lot of unnecessary overlap, the same things being tested again and again. The wish to replicate the experiment would perhaps be a valid reason to test the same phenomenon, but this overlap is mostly due to the experimenters not knowing of the other experiments already conducted. Part of the reason why this may still be going on is the problem that so-called null results are not getting published enough in scientific journals. From the point of view of the taxpayer, animal tests are a waste of their money. After all, much of the testing, military and scientific, is being funded by the taxpayers. I am in general very much in favor of taxes being used for science, especially basic research, but not without ethical justification. A lot of the results of animal testing has been such that nothing new was or even could be learned from them. Other studies could have been done with less suffering being caused. One ethical issue related to animal testing has to do with what is happening to the experimenters themselves and what is happening to students forced to participate in animal testing. These are presumably originally ordinary people who go to college to become experts in some field they are interested in. But then they end up causing cats to become drug addicts. They may heat up dogs to watch them die, or cause apes to suffer long-time depression, or worse. They wouldn't do those things to humans, would they? What makes it possible for humans to treat other animals horribly is speciesism. We simply categorize them as the other, and through this othering make it possible for us to treat them without any compunction. But you most likely already know that humans can do the same to other humans as well. During the Second World War, the Japanese had a Unit 731 conducting human experiments in China. I don't care to describe those experiments here. The Nazis in Germany, during the same war, included many respected scientists who used various prisoners, especially Jews but also others, in horrible experiments, and then gave lectures on those experiments in universities without anyone protesting. At least in the case of the Nazis, it was the pseudoscientific nonsense about their allegedly superior race and the inferiority of the other races, and even the subhumanity of the Jews, that made it psychologically possible for them to conduct those experiments, torture and murder. In Tuskegee, USA, black people were experimented on from 1932 to 1972 to study the effects of syphilis. This was done without their consent or even their knowledge, and without providing them the treatment that was readily available. That was also pretty horrible, if not quite as sadistic as the tests by the fascists I just mentioned. But in this case as well, it was a racist belief and attitude that made the difference. Now we know that there is no scientific basis for the claim about races, but we also consider it more important that all humans have the same moral value, which is the basis of human rights. So humans clearly have been able to do these horrible things to other humans as well, not just other animals. They didn't really have an ethical justification for the horrors during the war. It is difficult to see how there could be a justification for what has been done and is being done to other animals now, at present, all the time, on a scale practically unimaginable. The famous author Isaac Bashevis Singer has said that all humans are Nazis against animals. We all participate in and benefit from the cruelty toward other animals. Relatively few seem to protest it. What does this say about us as a species? Can we call ourselves virtuous? What other morally significant effects does this have? For centuries, some have thought that even eating animals, not to mention mistreating them intentionally, has the effect of making us morally callous. Some serial killers have reportedly practiced killing by first turning their sadistic impulses toward helpless small animals before moving on to humans. Something similar is happening in universities, as students are more or less forced to participate in experiments on animals as a standard procedure. Failing to do so may mean a failing grade, possibly even being forced to change one's major and study something else. Participating in cruel treatment of animals as part of their studies and research may numb the student and researcher to the suffering they witness and cause. This means that students are being indoctrinated, as Alice Haim has said. The International Network for Humane Education was founded to help change this situation by promoting progressive science teaching and the replacement of animal experiments by working with teachers to introduce alternatives and with students to support freedom of conscience. Already in the 1950s, researchers Russell and Birch came up with a principle known as the 3 R's: reduce, refine, and replace. The point is to reduce the number of experiments on animals to the minimum necessary, to refine the experiments so that the least amount of suffering is caused, and to replace the test animals with something else whenever possible. In the 2007 edition of Animal Liberation, Aaltola added redirect and reject, where the first refers to redirecting funds away from animal experiments to other types of experiments, and the latter to simply rejecting suggested experiments if they are not strongly justified. In the same book, Aaltola argues that because of science policies, scientists often tend to think that animal testing is the only or the right way to do science. Alternative methods are not generally known or taught, even though they do exist. For example, animals are being used in teaching when there are several alternative methods of teaching, such as using synthetic models, computer models, or just videos. There are organizations that seek to promote the welfare of animals and stop experiments on animals, such as the Eurogroup for Animals, the European Coalition to End Animal Experiments, the European Consensus Platform for Alternatives, and probably others. But the funding for these organizations is very small, especially compared to the industries using animal testing. Interest groups benefiting from animal testing have a lot of power over legislators, because politicians lack the time to get the required expertise and they have to trust experts. Trusting experts is in general a good thing, but the problem is that the issue is ethical, and the experts being trusted are not usually experts on philosophical ethics, and in fact have a vested interest in the continuation of animal experiments. Also, the industries benefiting from the testing use a lot of money to oppose legal restrictions. Experimentation on animals is a big business, with turnover measured in billions of dollars or euros. Government funding for it alone is huge. In addition to that, there is all the private funding. Even the business around the equipment for experiments alone is big. In his book, Singer asked this philosophical question about experimentation. Would the scientists be willing to experiment on just one human orphan under 6 months old that had brain damage, if that was the only way to save the lives of thousands of humans? I think he assumed they would at least hesitate, and quite possibly most people would not allow such an experiment. But this child would be a human, and therefore anatomically and physiologically normal, except for the brain damage. Any results from toxicological or medical testing on the child would certainly be generalizable to other humans far better than tests on members of completely different species. We could feed the child floor wax or drop cosmetics into its eyes and get far more reliable information about the effects of these substances to humans than we currently get from tests done on other animals. The main reason why tests on other animals are usually considered acceptable, while even the suggestion of doing those same experiments on humans causes outrage, is that most people are speciesists, just like the Nazis were or are racists. And like some people, mostly men, are sexists. They only look out for the interests of the group they are a member of, looking down on others. But just like there is no justification for sexism or racism, there isn't one for speciesism either. Any justification for experiments on other animals have to be justified ethically by appealing to something that actually works as a justification. And experiments that lack that justification must be stopped. The animals being cruelly used cannot do it themselves, so we humans have to stand up for them. If we don't, we allow the evil to continue. If we then are victimized by some powerful tyrant who has complete power over us, why should we expect anyone to try and save us? A proposed defense for testing on animals is that they are necessary to reduce human suffering. Ignoring for the time being everything else about the argument, it can be pointed out, and has been in animal liberation, that practically countless children die from malnutrition and poor healthcare all the time. They mostly die from curable or treatable illnesses like diarrhea and malaria. AIDS is a big killer as well, although now it can be treated and made much less deadly. But it costs a lot of money. Instead of using all those funds for experiments on animals, a lot more good could be done by allocating them differently. Despite the use of words like veal, pork, mutton, beef, and even the more general meat to describe the muscles of an animal to be eaten, the fact is that it is the flesh of another sentient being. There are attempts to grow meat in laboratories, but that is not economically viable yet, if it ever will be. Lab-grown meat would be the only kind of meat obtained without harming actual animals. It would probably not be ecologically the best way to make food, but at least it would do away with the unnecessary harm that comes with eating animals. Killing animals for food always involves the part where the animal is killed, so even if done in the most humane way possible, it is never going to be a pleasant experience for the animal. That said, there are differences between different ways of reaching that end. These differences may have ethical significance as well. I will try to describe some of the ways animals are treated in animal agriculture, as most people are not really aware of what is going on or what is at stake. To form an opinion on the issue, you need to have at least some minimum level of knowledge, which is all I'm aiming for. The vast majority of meat is produced by the means of intensive factory farming. This is done to minimize the cost of production, of course, and treats the animals being used as machines that turn feed into meat. The lives of the animals used in these meat factories are full of suffering from birth to death. A lot of the meat consumed in the so-called developed nations is poultry. The chickens bred for meat production suffer from many production stress diseases in poultry factories. Among other causes, they are bred to grow muscles as fast as possible, which puts a lot of strain on their hearts, metabolism, joints, and even the bones. They grow to full size in just 35 days when they are slaughtered, unless they die from things like heart disease. They also suffer from bad air quality, which is so bad that the humans working in the facility are recommended to use respirators inside the building and to spend as little time in there as possible. Whether we are talking about chickens used to only make eggs or those grown for their meat, the birds have to live in those conditions their whole, short, miserable lives. Even if the relevant laws are obeyed, they have nowhere near enough space, being forced to live in these overcrowded factories. It is not even possible for them to rest properly. They certainly do not have enough space to function normally according to their natural instincts, which are still strong in them despite the selective breeding. One clear indication of their stress is the noise they make. In their natural environment, chickens are mostly quiet. When laying eggs, chickens instinctively try to keep their nests and eggs hidden, and they lay their eggs in solitude. This is not possible in an egg factory, causing significant stress. Also, because the back of the chicken often becomes red and moist in the process of laying the egg, it may trigger the other chickens to instinctively peck it, which frequently leads to infections and death. It is not unusual for up to 15% of the chickens in these factory conditions to be lost due to various reasons which could be avoided. The dead chickens are treated as waste. All the chicken thrown out as dead are not even actually dead yet. In some farms, chickens are able to roost and to make nests for laying eggs in suitable places. They may also have an indoor space and a freely accessible yard outside. These conditions make their lives rather good, and collecting eggs from such a facility does not seem to disturb them. The male chickens are still typically killed young though, and the hens as soon as they no longer produce enough eggs to keep the operation profitable to the owner. If a human prisoner is kept in confinement for a long period of time, they will begin to show what is called stereotypical behavior. It is repetitive, mechanical movement like walking back and forth. It is a form of stress behavior and can be observed in all animals kept in factory farms. Different abilities lead to different needs. Chickens need a flock with a social structure, for example. They can also become bored for lack of stimuli, because chickens are not brainless machines. They use dozens of different sounds to communicate different things and understand even abstract concepts like symmetry. They remember other chickens and exhibit a wide spectrum of emotional states. They teach their offspring and have a good memory and ability to learn. The most intelligent animal Westerners commonly eat is the pig. Pigs are at least as intelligent as dogs, so they suffer even more from boredom than chicken. They easily learn things like pressing a button to control the temperature of their pen, to fetch balls, and to recognize several toys and remember them even years later. They are capable of more intense mental focusing than primates and are clearly more intelligent than 3-year-old human toddlers. In more natural environments, pigs would be very active, scrounging the grounds for anything edible most of the time. They are inquisitive and emotional, forming complex social networks and emotional bonds. They are also very playful and like to play with different kinds of toys if given the opportunity. Being very social, they communicate constantly, using over 20 different sounds. They live in groups that build a common nest, as well as a separate toilet some distance away from the home nest, because pigs like to be clean. For farrowing, they build a separate nest. The sow lives in it with the piglets for 9 days before introducing them to the rest of the group. None of this natural behavior, of course, is possible in factory conditions, or even the kind of pigsty they used to have in old-style farms. In cramped conditions with little to no stimuli, the pigs will harm each other out of frustration, fighting and biting ears and tails, which is why in some places they cut the tails off the piglets, without using anesthesia or other medication, of course, as a bitten tail could get infected, which would lead to an economic loss. To avoid a possible taste in the meat, pigs are castrated, also without anesthesia, by slicing open the scrotum and pulling on their testicles. Imagine that. Pigs often die of stress in pork factories. There is even a term for the problem: porcine stress syndrome. The main cause of this is the lack of space, as a pig cannot usually even turn around in its pen. As in poultry factories, the floors for pigs have been designed with ease of cleaning and not the welfare of the animals in mind. The concrete or slotted floor is bad for the feet and hooves. To maximize production, the sow will be forced pregnant as soon as possible. Thus, the piglets are weaned very early from their mothers in just 4 weeks, when that would naturally occur between 14 and 17 weeks. Mortality among separated piglets is high. As it does with all mammals, separating the young from their mothers causes them anxiety and distress. Singer notes that an ordinary dog owner caught treating their dog similarly would be fined, but a pig breeder will be given tax cuts and other government support. Meanwhile, pigs live in chronic apathy, depression, and stress. Cows are treated similarly. To keep milking cows producing milk, they have to give birth every year. Their offspring are typically taken away almost immediately after birth, which is painful for the cow and scary for the calf. Without human interference, the cow would stay with its offspring for up to a year. When separated, they call for each other for 4 or 5 days, trying to get to each other, refusing to eat. Some of the calves become ill. Normally, the calf would be running around and bonding with other cows, but they are usually kept in small pens that prevent any such natural activities. Calves have a strong need to suck, and if raised with other calves, will suck and swallow their hair, causing problems with digestion. Calves are butchered for veal or raised to be butchered for beef, or to be used for breeding and or milking if it's a female, a cow. Cattle are fully matured at age 4 and live up to 15 to 20 years of age, but are usually butchered at 4 or 5. After giving birth, the cow is soon inseminated again. Milking is continued almost until a new calf is born. This can go on for only a few years, after which the cow will produce less milk and will be killed and sold as dog food or minced beef. The few lucky cows raised in a system including a yard are able to walk around, eating and resting in separate places. Even in those places, the number of cows may be too great for the space available, causing aggression. But most cows globally do not even have this luxury, as they live their whole lives chained to one place. Cows are very social by nature, but obviously are unable to socialize among each other normally in those conditions. Cattle feed is not usually good for their digestive system because more protein-rich feed is preferred to make them grow faster and produce more milk. Thus, they are fed soy and beef cattle also ground fish. The horns of cows are often removed by burning, which is painful as there are nerves going all the way up the horns. A more humane way is to use weights to make the horns grow downward. In both cases, the point is to make the cattle unable to harm each other. The process of slaughtering animals has problems of its own. They are usually transported by truck, which is the first and only time they travel, especially in such a strange manner. Even just being loaded into a vehicle causes fear, especially if this is done in haste or in a heavy-handed manner. The trip itself causes motion sickness. Normally cows would eat all day long, but when being transported they don't get any food and might not even have water. Dehydration and frostbite are common. The weight of animals is reduced significantly because they evacuate their bowels and are dehydrated, and also because of the stress. The shrinkage can last up to 3 weeks. Stress reduces the effectiveness of their immune system, leading to cows getting sick significantly more than usual. Cattle are sometimes injured when being loaded into or out of the truck as they fall off the ramp. This can lead to slow and painful death. Sometimes the cattle are unable to get up because they were injured in transit. The attitude of the workers toward the animals they are handling can be indifferent to their pain because they are considered to be practically slaughtered already. So, a cattle with broken legs may be dragged across the floor fully conscious. Over 1% of cattle arrive at the slaughterhouse unable to walk. They are handled roughly. Mistreatment of the animals is frequent in all facilities dealing with animal agriculture unless they are strictly supervised. When the animals are finally near their end, moving toward the place of slaughter, they can smell the blood and perhaps see the carcasses hanging from the roof ahead. They naturally become frightened. By law, animals should be stunned prior to slaughter, but stunning fails frequently. The animals are assumed to be stunned even when they are actually conscious and able to feel pain. Stunning by using carbon dioxide used to be considered painless, but that turned out to be false. Using electricity is painful as well. Humans who have been electrically shocked report experiencing intense pain. When electric shocks are used in therapy, it is done under anesthesia for a reason. Ritual slaughter is particularly nasty because it involves cutting the throat of an animal that is required to be fully conscious. The original purpose of this rule was probably to prevent the sale of the meat of sick animals or even a dead animal, which could have been a health risk for the humans eating the meat. The method of killing originally used, which differs from what is actually being used in professional ritual slaughterhouses, was the most humane method available at the time. Considering this, it would make sense to allow using stunning before slaughtering, and that is actually being done in several, but not all, countries. But there is an even easier way to obey religious rules like this. One can just stop eating animal products. Then one doesn't need to worry about the meat perhaps not being kosher, halal or whatever. Fish are just as capable of sensing pain as are other vertebrates. Fish farming is just as bad as other factory farming of animals. The fish are kept densely packed, and often even half of the fish are diseased. Fish are handled roughly, and they are unable to behave as they would in a natural habitat, causing them to suffer from stress. Fish typically take much longer to die than other animals because they are simply pulled out of the water and left to suffocate. Fish may also be gutted alive while they are fully aware, and dying like that can take a surprisingly long time. Fish are, of course, not the only kind of marine animal humans eat. Crabs and lobsters are boiled alive, causing them to suffer for a couple of minutes of completely unnecessary pain. Slow cooking is even worse. But even before this, they are transported and stored alive, which also causes unnecessary suffering. Hunting could allow the prey to live mostly natural lives until hunted, which sounds good at first, but even that is problematic. The animals that manage to escape will suffer from the stress for days afterwards. For example, waterfowl are often injured by the shotgun pellets, but manage to escape, leading to slow death. According to estimates, for every bird killed, one is only injured in hunting. Westerners typically eat between 40 and 100 animals per year. That means an average 80-year-old person has eaten between 3,200 and 8,000 animals during their life. Stop and think about the implications of that for a moment. People don't usually want to know about the treatment of the animals they have eaten, and it is rarely portrayed realistically, except in revealing documentaries made with the help of whistleblowers and hidden cameras. The average person knows from TV documentaries more about the lives of wild animals like elephants and snakes than the lives of domestic pigs and farmed salmon. Think about why that might be the case. Finland has become notorious in recent years by still allowing fur factories, despite national and international pressure to stop it. Fur animals are not domesticated like pigs and cows, but wild animals with naturally big territories. For example, minks typically live in a territory of about 6 kilometers, 4 miles, of beach. Yet in fur factories they are kept in small cages. The babies of fur animals have a high mortality rate in cages. For foxes, about 30% is common. The environment they are forced to live in is completely alien and unnatural for them, and the animals become seriously disturbed. Sometimes they eat their own offspring, for example. The revelations from documentaries using secretly filmed material from fur factories have led to the industry having a deservedly bad reputation, but the Finnish government, possibly among others, still subsidizes it from taxes. There is a lot more that could be said about how humans treat other animals, but I don't mean to make a comprehensive analysis of it here. What I have done is simply explain the most common problems from an ethical point of view with animal agriculture, especially factory farming. I stated in an earlier video that the scope of morals, at least among the educated, has expanded from encompassing only small tribal groups to including the whole of mankind and to a large degree also other animals and even beyond. For example, many people consider their pets to be members of their families, very similar to their children, and would never intentionally hurt them. Unfortunately, many do harm their pets out of ignorance, but I will not discuss that here. It is curious that despite this loving attitude toward their pets, the same humans often see no problem in eating other animals, like pigs and chicken. As they become more aware of the realities of animal agriculture, people find it more difficult to continue eating meat. Most people probably prefer to not know and pretend to know even less than they do about how meat is produced. Those eating meat who try to justify their habit typically claim that eating animals is natural, necessary, normal, and pleasurable. I will address these points one by one. First, the claim that eating meat is natural for humans is true in the sense that humans have evolved as omnivores, capable of eating both plants and animal carcasses. The point of bringing this up is to claim that because eating meat is natural, it is at least ethically acceptable. This is a fallacy known as appeal to nature. Even if something occurs in nature, it does not follow that it is good or even acceptable. Also, according to Hume's guillotine, we cannot derive values from facts. Second, the claim that eating meat is necessary is simply false. The fact is that humans are able to process animal flesh, but that is not the only thing we can eat. We can also eat plants, and there are even health reasons to prefer doing so. Note that I am not claiming that the healthiness of a vegan diet makes it ethical. Those are separate issues, and a vegan diet can also be very unhealthy. Beer and chips are vegan after all. I will return to veganism later. For now, I am just pointing out that eating meat is not in any way necessary for humans, at least not in general. Third, the claim that eating meat is normal. This is about culture and social norms. It has little to do with ethics. It has been normal to treat black people as less than human in much of the Western world. Women have been treated as inferiors in most cultures. We can now see that racism and sexism are unethical. There have been many other social norms that have changed over time, generally for the better, I would say. For example, beating children is not accepted anymore. Fourth, eating meat is said to be a pleasure. That is easy to accept. Many people seem to enjoy it. I have enjoyed it myself as well. It just so happens that with increased knowledge of animal agriculture, I have sort of lost my appetite for meat. At least when I just eat plants, I will not feel guilty, as I will when eating animal products. But being able to enjoy something hardly makes it right. Emperor Nero and other ancient Romans enjoyed making human candles out of Christians. They also enjoyed gladiatorial combat that sometimes led to death, and all manner of executions, as have many others before them and since. Some people enjoy murdering others for fun. Pleasure could be a factor used in a utilitarian calculus used to assess the moral value of meat eating, but it certainly is a difficult thing to assess and not enough alone to justify the habit. It is obvious that most humans are used to eating a lot of meat in modern cultures. The amount of meat eaten can be so big only because of the way meat is produced in factory farms. In the past, people used to eat much less of it, but now that meat is so easily available and usually cheap because of government subsidies to the industry, it is no wonder that people eat so much of it. The same goes for dairy. I have already explained how the industry treats animals, which already should have made it clear that there are serious ethical problems with it. To make their treatment of other animals acceptable to themselves, humans have traditionally distinguished the human species from other animal species by using metaphysical ideas that are now untenable. Just as racism and sexism can now be seen as wrong, so can speciesism. That would mean that humans cannot treat other animals as machines or other objects, but actually have to consider them as moral objects. A moral object is something that has moral value and can be wronged, such as you. It doesn't mean they are all alike in every respect, just that moral objects have to be taken into consideration differently from mere things like tools, for example. A tool can have instrumental value because it can be used for some purpose. Something that is considered valuable in itself is said to have intrinsic value. Something can, of course, have both intrinsic and instrumental value at the same time. You can consider your friend valuable intrinsically, but you may also benefit from having that friend in a number of ways. Perhaps she will help you carry your bag, or assist you in your homework or something. But if you treat your friend only as an instrument, you won't have that friend for long. You know that treating others that way is not right, and now you have to think of all animals the same way. Because all animals have to be given proper consideration, it means they are moral objects. Only humans are generally thought to be moral subjects, capable of making decisions ethically. At the very least, it means that we have to think about animal welfare and protection. Other animals can be compared to humans who have not in the past been considered to have rights, such as women, children, and those disabled in some ways. Even children now have some rights and say in matters involving them. Jeremy Bentham already pointed out that what matters ethically is not, for example, the ability to think, but the ability to suffer, to sense pain. This view is called sentientism. According to this view, all sentient beings are moral objects. If you want more information on this, you can easily find groups advocating sentientism in social media, for example. Other animals have their own special needs depending on their abilities and instincts that vary by species. Most have a need to care for their offspring, move around unrestricted to some extent, and other very basic things like that. Simple, painless existence is not enough, as it obviously is not enough for humans. Humans are considered to have special human rights for the purpose of ensuring that no one is mistreated in a fundamental way. One issue in animal ethics is the question, should other animals have similar rights as well? Traditionally, Christians have believed that humans were given dominion over all nature by God, and humans have the right to use all of nature to their own benefit. Another interpretation of this emphasizes that humans were only given stewardship, and therefore it is our duty to take care of all of nature and not abuse it. Both still make a distinction between humans and the rest of nature that is difficult to justify metaphysically. Both views are forms of anthropocentrism, being human-centered in the sense of considering only humans to really have intrinsic value and significance. Humanism is a different way of being human-centered. It accepts that we humans are the only ones thinking ethically and are limited by our point of view. We do not have knowledge of the will or even existence of supernatural entities, for example. Despite our limited viewpoint, humanism allows for the intrinsic value of all sentient life. Biocentrism considers all life as inherently valuable, refusing to give humans a pride of place in the biosphere. I will return to that view when discussing environmental ethics, which is a broader subject than my topic now, animal ethics. Different ethical theories can be applied to animal ethics. A utilitarian approach, like Peter Singer's, seeks the best overall good. An important concept for this view is that of interest, as the theory requires that all the relevant interests are accounted for. That includes the interests of humans, who could benefit from the use of other animals, but also the interests of those animals. Everyone's pleasure and pain, as well as satisfaction and frustration of desires or preferences, counts equally, regardless of gender, race, or species. It is also possible to approach animal ethics from a deontological point of view. Tom Regan demanded that Kant's view that others should not be treated only as means to one's own ends should be expanded to include any subject of a life, including other animals. This means we should not treat other animals as resources at all, for any purpose. Regan criticized utilitarianism for only seeing value in the feelings or interests of the interested parties, but not those parties themselves. If then the greatest total good is achieved at the cost of the suffering or death of one person, there is nothing morally wrong in choosing that outcome. This is why he emphasized the inherent value of all sentient beings. It then follows that all sentient beings have rights, and it is not acceptable to violate those rights, even in order to use such evil means against one for the benefit of the many. Against the claim that only humans can have rights, Regan, as well as Singer and probably everyone else who thinks about this for more than a second, points out that the claim is just baseless speciesism. There is no attribute that only humans possess that could justify it, for not all humans have such abilities if the bar is high. For example, not all humans are able to think philosophically. If, on the other hand, the bar is low enough for all humans to pass, then many other animals meet the same criteria. If pigs lack the required intelligence, for example, but are more intelligent than 3-year-old toddlers, then do toddlers not have human rights? How about those with mental handicaps? Many animals besides humans are capable of forming even abstract concepts and beliefs, and of acting intentionally. They are conscious and, at least in some ways, self-aware. They can even have second-order beliefs. A believes that B believes, or even third-order beliefs. A believes that B believes that A believes. They are certainly aware of their bodies as distinct from the rest of reality. Social consciousness, understanding one's social standing with respect to others, is also very common. Regarding speciesism, here's a thought experiment I derived from the one used by Singer. You probably know that a human baby requires human parents or carers and socialization in order for it to develop into an ordinary human being. Without this, the baby will not develop the kind of consciousness that is usually considered to be the defining characteristic of our species. If it is such characteristics for which we have special human rights, then we could take unwanted newborn human babies to facilities where they would be fed but not socialized in any way. Then those babies would never develop the kind of psyche that allegedly makes all the difference. As they would not meet the criteria of humanity, they could be treated as mere objects. Those babies could be used for all kinds of testing for which other animals are now used, but due to their human anatomy and physiology, they would make much better test subjects. We could drop potentially toxic cosmetics into their eyes to see how badly they react, We could even butcher them for meat, although it might take some time for them to grow enough muscle. If this sounds wrong to you, then you should also see how it is wrong to treat other animals that way. Some people argue that human suffering is more important than the suffering of other animals, and so we shouldn't worry about them until the more pressing human suffering has been dealt with. Singer points out that it is far more difficult for us to stop wars, remove poverty and unemployment, and to solve these other big human problems than it is to stop the suffering of other animals in our hands. There is no reason we couldn't simply stop most of their suffering by banning factory farming and pointless, or even all, experimentation on them. In general, whataboutism is not motivated by genuine concerns. It is merely an excuse to not do anything about the issue in question. Those who whine about human suffering this way are not likely to do much about it either. They just don't want to do the simple things we actually could do about animal treatment to make the world a much better place. One silly argument for factory farming claims that even factory farming of animals is ethically acceptable because that way the animals in them get to live. Otherwise, they wouldn't ever be born. That sounds like a questionable benefit. Singer notes that similar arguments have in the past been given for slavery. Slaves were given the true religion and they were allowed to live within civilization. Intensive farming does not allow the animals to live anything like a natural life. It might be better for them to never be born. Singer brings up a third strategy some people use to argue for allowing the suffering of other animals. It is usually just a rhetorical trick, asking about the possible suffering of plants. It can be a genuine philosophical question, but usually the person asking it is not likely to care if the answer is that plants do indeed suffer. Rather, it is an attempt to justify eating meat. There is no evidence for the ability of plants to suffer. They have no central nervous system and could not avoid sources of pain even if they could experience pain. It is then difficult to see what evolutionary reason there could be for them to experience pain. But even if we knew plants can experience pain, we would still have to choose the lesser evil. Eating the plants ourselves would cause much less suffering than eating animals that have eaten far more plants than we would need to eat. As I have explained, other animals are being treated very badly by humans, and we should at least stop the large-scale holocaust that is going on in meat production, as well as all the unnecessary experiments on other animals. Questions still remain about the details, such as 1. Are there situations where animal testing might be acceptable? And 2. Are there any acceptable ways that animals could be grown and killed for food? Whatever the answers to those questions might be, it doesn't seem that there are any justifications for the current situation, which is actually getting worse by the year, as animal agriculture is becoming even more widespread in China. Even if you didn't know how much suffering we humans cause other animals all the time, now you do. And that means you have a duty to do something about it, doesn't it? The easiest thing to do, besides supporting animal rights organizations and sharing memes online, is to change your diet. Go vegan. Here are just some famous vegetarians or vegans in history and the present. Pythagoras, Plutarch, Leonardo da Vinci, Voltaire, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Carl von Linné, Percy Shelley, Charles Darwin, John Harry Kellogg, George Bernard Shaw, Leo Tolstoy, Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Einstein, Isaac Bashevis Singer, Rosa Parks, Coretta Scott King, Angela Davis, Joaquin Phoenix, Woody Harrelson, Billie Eilish. Some people have thought that veganism is just a new fad, but it clearly is not. Many opponents of slavery were also animal rights activists and vegans. Many feminists as well. Even the roots of child labor laws and protection of children in general are, in a curious way, in animal rights activism. More about that in Singer's book. When you oppose one injustice, it becomes easier, probably, to recognize and oppose other forms of injustice as well. Most vegans choose their diet for ethical reasons, even if for some it may be about health. In recent years, environmental reasons, especially the climate crisis, has finally begun to motivate lots of people to do their part by at least reducing their meat consumption. In my own experience, it is easy to do it in steps, first by replacing most meat products and only later the dairy products and eggs. As I have already made clear, using dairy doesn't reduce the suffering of cattle by much compared to eating beef. There are many new vegan products you can use as protein sources, but even the gladiators of Imperial Rome, top athletes of their time, lived on a vegan diet, mostly lentils. So you don't necessarily need anything new. That said, I would recommend testing different types of tofu, soy bits, seitan, Quorn and broad bean products. Some people claim that eating other animals is part of human nature, pointing at our canine teeth. But as Singer points out, we are much more closely related to chimpanzees and gorillas than we are to wolves or tigers, and those other primates eat almost exclusively plants. Further, as I mentioned earlier, humans are eating far more meat now than ever before. There is no necessity to it. In fact, health reasons seem to favor veganism, as several studies have found that people eating little or no meat have lived long lives, and that eating meat, especially beef, is connected to various cancers. It is easy to find vegan products in supermarkets now, and there is also a lot of information and many vegan groups online if you want to seek more information and cooking recipes. If you want to learn more about animal ethics, you can look for the works of, for example, Peter Singer, Tom Regan, Mary Midgley, Bernard Rollin, Stephen Clark, Steve Sapontsis, Evelyn Bluar, Paola Cavalieri, David De Garcia, Dale Jamieson, Joan Dunayer and Mark Rowlands. I want to mention one final thing, an argument for pet ownership. It may be ethically questionable to own pets. In fact, I think it can only be accepted in a legal sense, and no sentient being can be really owned any more than a slave can be owned in an ethical sense. But there is one argument I can think of for owning a pet. Domestic animals are almost our only connection to nature, without which humans could more easily consider other animals to be just mindless matter to be used. Dogs and cats and such that we interact with show that they are persons, and then it becomes impossible to not realize that the same applies to pigs, cows, chickens, as well as rabbits and rats in laboratories as well. For this reason, perhaps, it might be acceptable to own a pet. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This was all I wanted to say about animal ethics. Thanks for watching. In the next video I will take a look at environmental ethics. Bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.